Okay. Well, hello, everybody. We're at week 3 and session 5 of our series. So excited to have you here today, especially because it's a holiday. So I appreciate you guys coming. And I'm going to escape this. For some reason my slide. There we go. Okay, so I'm Diana Gray. I'm the Community Marketing Manager for the Americas. And we also have some partners with us today. So we have Manjula Rivathi, who are part of the Her Next Innings group out of India. And they're going to be working with us not only on the series that we've already put together, but we're also going to be hosting a career session when the series is over. It's going to be a kind of a standalone series. So they're working on that as we speak. And then I also just want to give credit to Anna Maria, who has helped with the series, does a lot to put all your videos, recordings, and everything on the shared site for the series, and then also helps manage the forum piece of this. So again, today we're on session 5. So you guys are more than halfway through, and we're going to be talking about exception handling and debugging. And then I also will put into chat the where you can register for session 6 if you haven't done that. That'll happen on Wednesday of this week. Great. And then just want to introduce some people today. These are the main people who will be helping me out this week. I actually don't have Lagesh on this slide, but I'll add him. He's here today to help us too. Many of you know him. He's been here for the last 4 sessions. We also have Mason, Turvey, and Jeffrey, who I'll let introduce themselves, and Tracy. So they're all new. And then we'll have Will and Rahul on Wednesday. So a great team. So Mason, do you want to start and just introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Mason Turvey. I am a four-time MVP now, and have experience all across the UiPath platform. My specialty was apps in the last MVP cohort. Still pretty big user of apps. I am currently a technical account manager working with WonderBotz. So just guiding customers through their strategic implementation of UiPath and things like that.
Great, thank you. And Jeffrey?
Sure. Hi, I'm Jeffrey. I work for a financial institution here in the United States. I've been working with UiPath and automation since 2017. I, just as Mason, also am last MVP for apps. I've been deploying the entire platform since the beginning. We joined very early on, so I'm very proud to have seen UiPath grow through the years and be what it is today. So very proud to be part of the team in the MVP and this associated series as well. So yeah.
Great, thanks. And Tracy?
So, hi, Tracy Dixon, 6-year MVP now. I live in Jacksonville, Florida, work for Centric Consulting, primarily on automation projects, some process improvement as well. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and Tracy has also been with us so long. She's actually a 7-year MVP this year, but okay. And then Lagesh, do you just want to say hi too?
Sounds good, Diana. So, my name is Logesh. I'm a technical architect at Kubotica, and I'm a UiPath MVP for 2025. And I'm part of UiPath customer success and helping customers scale and grow in their automation journey. Happy to be here and happy to be like part of this session to help you with all your questions, chat, etc.
Great, thanks. So we have a great team. You guys have been very active on chat, and with all your questions and great work that you guys are doing in the background. So we really appreciate that. Um, and for some reason, my computer does not like moving my slides forward. There we go. So again, we're going to be going through Excel automation with the modern experience in Studio, email automation with Studio and project organization. And you guys should be following along with your self-paced learning. If you guys are not doing that or having problems or need help, please reach out to us. You can do that on the forum. We have people monitoring that. We need you guys to catch up because we don't want you too far behind. So as we go into the second half of this, try to catch up as much as you can. I have mentioned that I will give you an extra month to finish all your self-paced training, but it's definitely more beneficial if you're kind of doing your training as we're going through these topics so that you kind of can hear more and understand more. But you do have all the recordings, so you can always go back and listen to them again. Just so you know, we just want to make sure we make it as easy as possible for you guys to follow along. And then again, I'll be putting the important links into the chat, for the series page, for the forum I just mentioned. Also where you can find all the recordings, the chapter you can join. And then lastly, the learning path on the second tab. Those are the courses you need to follow along with. And then when you're done with all of the things on that learning path, you will get from UiPath a training credential sent to you. All right, so I'm going to stop there and turn it over now to Mason and Jeffrey.
I will start by sharing my screen. Move this out of the way. And
I can see your screen.
okay, perfect. Great. Let's see if I can move this out of my way. No, it won't move. That's okay. Put it over here somewhere. It doesn't bother me. All right, so we're actually going to start today. I know we talked about exception handling. That will be on Wednesday. Today, we're going to be covering email automation and Excel automation. My session now is going to be about email automation, so I'm going to try to be as swift as possible so Mason has lots of time and we have lots of time for Q&A later on. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about packages. This being the associate developer, I'm only going to cover like content related to the associate developer. So most of it is going to be the UiPath.mail activity package. That comes with every project library, even the RE framework comes with. If you're creating a blank project, you will need to import that into your project. Again, UiPath.mail, very straightforward. Everything you need from sending, receiving, moving, we're going to cover the different ones that activities that come in here, but pretty much everything that you need will be covered. Anything additional to it, you'll have to import the packages related to your specific, email provider, whether that be Outlook for Office 365, for example. I know there's a whole mail out there, Gmail, obviously a very big common one, things like that. There's additional package that brings in more activities for you to deal with. With that said, if you come into the to your project, you will have available to you under the installed all the mail activities here. As you can see, there's SMTP, POP, and IMAC, which are standard protocols for emails. Have been around since the 80s. Outlook Windows, which is basically your Outlook desktop. We're going to talk a little bit about those and how they differ from the other ones. Exchange, which is pretty much everything that runs, including Office 365, not from an integrated services perspective. Activities will also be here. And then there's some additional, activities to handle mail in general. This Office also IBM Notes, for those of you that might be using that as well. I wanted to break this down a little bit by sending, receiving. Those are the two main categories. All the other ones are going to be auxiliary and brought in from there. So starting with the send, we essentially have three main activities on the package: send MSTP, and send Outlook Desktop, and send Exchange. Just wanted to open this up a little bit just to kind of show and highlight the three activities. These are standard protocols, as we were talking before. Every email service provider provides connectivity to SMTP, POP3, and IMAC4 standard. In addition, you might have activities that extend beyond your typical, functionality on those services like Outlook Desktop and Exchange and Gmail and all those other ones, which we'll cover later. Then you have your typical desktop. We've recently, I want to say about a couple of years ago, we've renamed those to Outlook Desktop because they were kind of confusing. At first, we thought it was just an Outlook, so it was unsure if you needed Outlook installed on your computer or not. In this case, yes, you do. Outlook Desktop runs off of your configured Outlook Desktop on your PC or on your robots. So for clarity now, they're namely so. The good news with this activity, and one of the pros, is that you don't have to do any configurations. You don't need authentication. You don't need connectivity, nothing, because everything is already configured out of the box with your desktop. The other quick note about WonderBotz is obviously it does not come installed with Outlook on it. It's typically just your operating system and your UiPath robots. But as you know, you can customize your snapshot to include Outlook and still run on your WonderBotz. So if you choose this path as your solution to send emails or receive emails, you could do that with WonderBotz. Send Exchange. So Exchange is basically Microsoft's email service. It runs standalone. So if you have an Exchange server on-prem or somewhere on a hosted server and on the internet or on the cloud, they'll all share in commonality the Exchange, including Office 365 also uses Exchange and Active Directory to make connectivities. We'll talk about connectivity because there's a few options there beyond the other ones, but we'll cover that in a second. As far as options to send emails, if you send an email through Outlook or any other email provider, you have your standard options: your to line, your subject line, and your body of your email. Some are hidden here on the properties just because there's a lot of options out there. BCC, CC. You can also configure the sender, like if you want to customize your sender based on what emails you're sending, things of that nature you can do. Almost all of them, and I'm going to use this SMTP to cover some of the common options with all of them. You have the ability to pass in an existing email variable and forward it. So basically forwarding the email to someone else, and you also might be able to reply to an existing email that you have. So all these are pretty standard. With Outlook, also attachments. Attachments is on the face of the SMTP. It is kind of in the property panel of Outlook, and attachments is also on the face of the Exchange. So again, attachments is also a pretty common use case for sending emails. That will be there. Other options on the Outlook desktop. Obviously, as a desktop application, they might have multiple accounts, so you have a field to allow you to specify which account are you referring to within your Outlook. There's also the ability to send on behalf of somebody. A lot of people don't use this feature, but it's available here, and the sensitivity of the email as well. Very, very straightforward here. Also, both of these have an option to save it as a draft, but pretty straightforward and comparable with one and the other. Moving on to receiving. So receiving, the standard protocols is POP3 and IMAC 4. These again date back to the 80s. POP3 was the first one. So when you look at the POP3 activity, it's very simplistic. There's not a lot of options here. There's every single one of them has how many emails you want to retrieve. And then here, there's an option to, do I want to delete them when I retrieve them, or do I want to keep it on the server? And then, of course, your output of the list of emails that you've got. It is what it is. There's no other customizations. There's no other definitions for, like, for example, IMAP. You can define which folder you want to look for. In POP3, it's very simplistic. You're going to get the last 30 emails, no matter what folder they're in, no matter what there is. There's no filtering. There's no nothing. It's just a matter of giving you the last X number of emails and delete them, yes or no. IMAP comes with a few more options, of course. Again, being a little bit more modern. It is allowing you to select the folder. So if you want to get 30 emails from the inbox or 30 emails from a special folder that maybe you contain for your project, it can be used for that. A lot of these other ones also have filters. IMAP uses a old sort of language of querying for filters. I have an example here. As you can see, it's pretty simple. Subject urgent. So any subject that has the word urgent on it will be filtered if you were to use that filter. Pretty straightforward. A lot of documentation on it. Like I said, it's been around for almost 50 years. Aside from that, here we have a few other options. This is kind of interesting because if you're managing your process of managing the emails in an email account, you might want to consider this on the architecture of your process. But essentially, what the options are is unread only, so meaning any message that's already been read, meaning has been dealt with. If you want to take it in that context, we want to ignore. We just want to basically get the new ones that have not been read yet. Also, do I want to mark? So this is similar to delete messages. After I retrieve these emails, do I want to mark them as read already so they're not dealt with again, and so on and so forth, and of course the other ones. It does have the option of ordering the 30 emails either by the oldest or the newest. I can conceptualize a use case where you're cleaning up an email box and you want to get the oldest first to process from to the newest. Could be an example. I'm sure there's others out there that you can refer to. And again, all the options for the email quantity and the output is also there. Desktop, once again, we do have filters. These filters now are a little bit more customizable. It follows the Outlook configuration. You still have the option here to define the account and the mail folder. Once, just like the IMAP, it also allows you for the mark as read and only get unread messages and the order of emails. So again, pretty standard and follows through with the other ones. Here, same thing as the Outlook desktop. The filtering uses the same schema. This one does have the ability to determine if I want to get the attachments or not. You can always get the attachments later, but sometimes if you're getting a lot of emails, it might be a lot of time consuming, so you might want to skip attachments when you're returning it or not. The option that the email is HTML, and once again, the read and unread and the order are also here. Once again, because there's the ability of using shared folders, you also have the option. A lot of folks don't use shared folders, but I've used it in a couple of projects and stuff. So essentially, these are the activities to send and receive. This is going to be your bread and butter of your processes. Beyond these is going to be a lot more activities. We'll cover those in a second. But what I wanted to talk about now that we've covered what the activities are and what the properties is to send and receive is how do you connect to your server? How do you authenticate to the server? And how do you secure that connection? Because a lot of us work in business environments and that is important. So I'm gonna refer here to some of my notes. I'm actually going to zoom this in a little bit so we can all see and read. So connectivity-wise, generally, we're going to need the host name or the IP address of the server and the server port. Exchange and Office 365 do have additional options and configurations. We'll cover those in a while, in a little bit. Authentication-wise, username, which usually is your email, and the password will be the authentication method for which service. Once again, Exchange and Office has to be weird, so we'll cover those in a second. If you're using OAuth setups, it's very simple. There is an option for, as a matter of fact, I am going to open this and select, so you can just see the properties. And as you can see, there's an option here for OAuth. You basically just setting this to true and you're configuring your OAuth in your service provider. And then you are...
There's somebody who's not on mute. Can you please mute yourself?
And then you're replacing the password with the token, which is essentially what you created in your service provider. As far as encryption, bring this up again. So we covered server and port. You have your email and your password for authentication. Down here, you have the option to set up your secure connection. By default, it's automatic. I think very few people will use the none option, especially in business environments. But none says, I do not want to use any kind of secured, I don't know, with today's world of security concerns, I don't know who would want to do that, but it's there as an option. We like options. So automatically will try to determine based on your mail client, what is your security configuration. And then if you want to explicitly determine what they are, you can select SSL on Connect, start on TLS, TLS when available. Down here, I actually, just for clarification and understanding, put the standard ports and connectivity types. This is standard. Obviously, every email provider can change and use the standard ports or not. but it kind of gives you a map of what ports linked to what configurations. So if you want to just take a guess and try, and you really want to explicitly say, I do want connection, and kind of like fail if there's not a secure connection to my email, you would want to use that, and you can use that table as a reference. A couple of notes and tips. So cloud services these days are cloud native. So they do support Pop IMAP and SFTP, including Gmail, Outlook, and Yahoo, Hotmail, and all those, but it's usually not turned on by default. And this causes some weird errors. Like if you don't know about this simple fact, you might start create an email address, start using it, and next thing you know, you're getting errors. The host is disconnected, cannot reach the host, authentication failed, and you're like, what's going on? I have everything right, the server is right, the port is right. It really just comes to the fact that your service might have your account not enabled Pop IMAP against SMTP by default. So you just have to go to your service provider, identify where that option is, click it. Usually it's almost instantaneously, and then try again, and everything is going to work just fine. But it's one of those things that you have to understand. It's also a security feature, because if you enable Pop IMAP for everybody, you're handing out to any hacker out there the ability to just start trying out and finding vulnerabilities in your email. So by limiting and specifying it per account, you're kind of reducing that risk a little bit. As far as integrated services, so if you notice here in all these activities, there is the integrated service options. What this is doing is it's essentially, the configuration remains the same, very, very important. But what is changing is you're connecting to your integrated services from your robot, from your development machine, and you're passing on what you're trying to do. Send an email, receive an email, whatever the case might be. The configurations that we talked about here, from connectivity to authentication to securing, are all set up on your integrated services. So you're delegating basically these activities and this connection to the email server from the cloud platform rather than from your computer. This can help you in case of very restricted network firewalls, which forbid certain ports or certain IPs or certain traffic, and you're having a hard time. You could utilize integrated services as to facilitate that communication. Again, always use industry practice. Don't take this as a bypassing of security. Always assume that every email, every attachment could be a payload or some phishing scheme. So use best practice in the industry to handle those at all times. But it can facilitate connectivity. I think with everything from this to SFTP and other things, is connectivity sometimes can be an issue, especially with the hyper concerns that we have in today's world on security. With that said, I'm going to move on to the easiest activities of all to explain connectivity. Outlook Desktop. You don't need any, simply because it's already configured on your application. You are using, one important note here to say about Outlook Desktop is because you are using an application. Depending on the resources of your robot machine especially, it is another application that's going to be loading. So if you are using some ERM application, some other, browser, some other applications, you're not adding this to the resource load of that machine. It can slow things down. It can also create non-responsives, maybe even throw some errors on your desktop because it's waiting for desktop to respond to UiPath, and it doesn't. Obviously, on Wednesday, we're going to cover error handling and exceptions like that. But it boils down to resources. I think ultimately, any machine that has unlimited resources can run a number of applications without a problem. But just something to keep in mind when it comes to that. As far as SMTP, you'll see here and shortly on the demo, we're going to cover the configurations and how we did it. I'm going to turn off integrated services. So once again, we have the server, the port. We already talked about that, the IAuth, and username and password. One option that we haven't talked about is the ignore CRL. So CRL is basically the certificate revocation list. So imagine your company has an email server, just set it up, contacted a third provider to provide you with a secure certificate for your email. You get it, you're operating. All of a sudden, that certificate gets compromised. Usually the authority in your organization will revoke it and will contact you, obviously, to set up a new one and so on and so forth. And meanwhile, that's being shared through this revocation list. So if I'm ignoring it, I'm basically saying, don't worry if it's revoked or not, continue using it. And meanwhile, in the scenario that I'm giving, you could be basically send communications thinking they're secured and no longer secure because some bad actor might have access to your certificate. It's just an example, obviously, to demonstrate the importance of CRL. So in production, you definitely want to keep it false. There also might be some connectivity issues where you might want to use it as true, but again, something to work with IT departments to make sure that it is not, and obviously for security reasons, not recommended. So that's that. Again, same scenario here. On IMAP, we are using the server port. There obviously will be different from the other one. OAuth, everything is exactly the same. Same thing for POP. And now, Exchange. Here's our can of worms. So there's a lot of options for Exchange. If you have a pure Exchange server, either running on premise or running on some hosted server, you're most likely going to need to configure this portion. The server, again, just like the other ones, in this case, a server version, because they differ from version to version. You can use an email to let the activity kind of discover what are the configurations for your Exchange server and then take it from there. In most cases, you will need to configure your authentication to Active Directory. Exchange being integrated into Active Directory, rather be Azure Active Directory or on-premise, you'll need a domain, username, and password, just like the other ones. So far, so good. It gets a little bit more complex when you go into Office 365. Now, side note is Office 365 has their own activities. They all work out of a scope that creates that authentication, that kind of configures how the authentication is, which is separate from here. But you can also use it here. In fact, I use Office 365 through the Exchange mail on my organization. And it's very simple, but it does require some heavy lifting from your IT department. You need to configure Office 365 on this admin side, and you might have to do some configurations on your Azure Active Directory as well. But the options are here. Obviously, I'm not going to cover them one by one, but they're all here. And one of them is absolutely using username and password. Again, it all depends on the configuration on your side, and this is where it gets a little tricky in duality. But again, I think when you're setting up your projects and you're using mail in your organization, you have to have that resource from your IT department, if you're not the one, to kind of help you with this as well. But aside from that, this is all about the authentication, authorization, and connectivity. I'm not sure if there's any questions about this, since this is a topic. I can pause here for a second just to see if anybody has any questions, and then move on to the demo. See if questions have been asked. I'm going to move on. And for the demo, what I'm going to be doing is actually set up a email through GMX, and it's called UiPath demo. And I've set up here some multi-assigns just to kind of break down how the information we're using, because we're going to be reusing this in all of the demos that we're going to be doing. So I set up the email. I also created a temporary secure email, even though we're not going to be using this, because this is actually not the proper way of securing an email. You would be using a third party, credentials management or your orchestrated assets to do that and retrieving it. But both of them are possible, and they are set up here. I have my email, which is also my username from my particular account. Then I have the configuration for the SMTP server. I have the configuration for the IMAP server, and I have the configuration for the POP server. Of course, this information came from the email provider itself. We can't just guess. They use standard ports, so that was easy peasy. And then we're going to move into the different demo parts. First of all, I'm going to send an email. I'm actually going to use SMTP from my GMX account to send to my Outlook account. We'll probably see the notification come up here when that happens. And very straightforward, simple subject. It's the body, it's a plain text. We're going to talk more about that in the next one. Other than that, nothing fancy goes on here. Interesting enough, I did put a sender with a text and some scribbles. You'll see that's going to come through on the email as well. The second part will be creating an email with actually an HTML body. This is for if you want to send some fancy email with a little bit more personality, I suppose. By standard, the default is text. So anything you put in here will become your text that will be sent out. But you can convert this to an HTML body. As you can see, there's some options here on the edit itself that you can use, including bringing variables from your process. Very easy, very quick. If you like simplicity, this editor might be enough. If you want something a little bit more complex, you do have another activity called Create HTML Content. The editor here is a little bit more sort of feature-rich. You can do coloring, you can do, font definitions and all this stuff. You can include tables, pictures, links, you name it. Just like the other one, you do have like an argument kind of functionality to bring in variables from your process. As you can see, I created this value, which I referenced my email variable in the process. But you can create tables too. If you have a data table in your process that your process generated and you try to email that to somebody so they can see the output or whatever the case might be, you can also do that here. For demonstration purposes, I just have a bunch of gibberish and I'm bringing in that value, which to bring in the value, all you have to do is just click and it brings it in. The cool part about this is obviously you can put signatures here. You can configure this in many ways. And you even have the ability to create HTML code directly into your editor and do that. Once you do that, you're basically saving this into a variable. The variable is type string, but it's basically HTML code that's going to go in here. Another note to have is you have the ability to set this to, by default, it will create a random one, HTML content 0, but this basically creates a template. So if you use the same email over and over and over again in your process, you don't have to redefine this every time. You do have to bring this in, but you just point it at the activity that you have defined it. You can rename that to other names. I've enabled here hidden folders in others, so I can show you. Here's the HTML content 0. Again, you can rename it. You can call it, do whatever you want to do. You can even use it as a base template to create other emails and define them different by, copying and pasting with another name and so on and so forth. So this template feature can be very handy if you are doing a lot of, emails and configurations back and forth. But essentially, and I'm going to delete this extra one that I brought here to define, all you really need to do is bring that in, again, only if you need more advanced or the template functionality, and you're editing your email, bringing in the variables you need, configuring it, and then the output will be used on your use as a variable. You're going to just bring it into your activity. So we're going to do that. And the third part is we're going to actually attach a attachment. Also using Send Outlook desktop, so I'm sending out from my Outlook to my GMX account, which we'll get to see later. I will be using this part. So you can provide a static path if you have, like in this case would be an example of a static file that you'll always create with the same name. In reality, you might be wanting to use a variable that has the path to the file that you want to include. You can add as many as you like and define them either hard-coded or variable linked. This is one way when you're defining a set number of activities. On the other hand, you can also create a list or any enumerable enumerator of your paths and assign it as a variable that you will then bring into this collection set. So if you actually compiling into a variable that's a list or any kind of enumerator, you can also bring this in here. Yes, definitely later. You're also going to be able to use that as well. In this case, I'm just hard coding it in there, and we're going to move on. Finally, because I want to show the IMAP and the POP, and that how ultimately they are identical, you will see here the enumeration of the email. So it's going to get all the emails using the IMAP protocol, and in parallel is going to use the pop, and then it's just going to give us a message saying this is the IMAX. So essentially, we should have two emails twice because one is coming from the IMAP list, the other one is coming from the POP3. Essentially, it should all be the same. I'm also leaving the options here to unread because none of these will be read, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure I mimic the standard, protocols for POP. Once that's up, so this is just for show and tell kind of, so you can see, oh yeah, it's retrieving, we send two emails, it's retrieving two emails, and here's the information, and so on and so forth. Part 5, we're actually going to take that list. I'm actually using the IMAP list to enumerate through it and to use a couple of additional activities. One is to save the email. You might have to do that for auditing purposes or just process documentation for later, or even to process on another component. The second part is iterate through all the attachments. We're only going to have one, but same thing, and then it's going to save it into a folder, which I'll have to navigate later, so we're not losing time. And here we will leave it. So this part is done. On part 6, I'm going to do this a little bit different. So we talked about how some retrieve activities have filters, but what if you don't know or don't have the ability to actually filter it correctly? You want to do it on your process? Well, we will be using LINQ to filter your emails, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm actually, if you guys missed earlier, I'm sending 2 emails. The subject of one is urgent, the other one is confidential, just to make things easier. So I'm actually searching for the confidential one. And again, simple, straightforward, LINQ where function M subject contains confidential. And then I'm retrieving first or default. Obviously, in a real process, we will be making some conditions, make sure that email filter didn't return default, but this is just a demo. And we're making sure that it is there. Then I'm going to be logging some basic values, and we're going to be exploring a little bit about what is the content of email filters or the email variable arguments. And we're also going to be checking how many attachments it has. Then once we're done with that, we're actually going to be doing the same thing to attachments. We want to be filtering the attachments for the one specific that we know it's called test. Once we get that, we will be using that to pass on to the saved email attachments back into the folder that we've created here and I brought here. And as you can see, as a magic trick, see the hat is empty. There's no bunny inside. So let's go ahead and let's play this out, and let's hope that there's no live Murphy Law going on. And here we are. So as you can see here on the locals, I have my email address, I have the password, I have my SMTP ports and servers, IMAPs and POPs, and of course the lists are all blank because we haven't gotten to that part of the demo. So now let's go ahead and send our first email. Our first email will be our Gmail account that's going to be sending to our Outlook. I have Outlook obviously open because we're going to be using it. Shortly enough, you'll see the notification here come up with the notification that the email got received. With that said, let's continue waiting for the email. We're going to send the body of the email with the body. Now this time I'm sending it from the Outlook to the Gmail. We're going to validate that in part 3. I'm sorry, in part 4. On part 3, we now not only just sent the email, but also the attachment. Oh, that's not what I want. And just for validations, we did receive the email. I don't know if I saw the notification, but here it is. It's saying that my name is that specific sender name that I did. Again, you can customize that, and it's just a simple test email going through. Now that we're here, and I just want to confirm because one of them has an attachment, I want to make sure both emails arrive. There's no point in getting just one. There it is. Now we have both. So I've confirmed on the website of the email that we did receive the 2 emails, and we're now going to validate here by in part 4. I'll put this up a little. So it went down this path. So here it is. It's showing the 2 emails. So got 2 emails. One was the urgent, one was the confidential. Now it's going down the IMAP, which is going to return the same 2 email address. So basically just saying they both work the same way. It's really just a matter of what do you need? You need a simple one like POP3 to just get your last 30 emails, or do you actually want something more customizable that you can create some filters and really narrow down to what emails are you trying to retrieve from your server. Now that we have this, we should have here the IMAP. As you can see, there are 2 emails, and there's a bunch of information there. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to go through the save email. Should be able to pop in our urgent email has been saved. So we're good. We now have one attachment. It's going to save the attachment. Here it is, save the attachment. Now it saved the confidential, and we'll save the attachment for the confidential. So all 4 of them are here. Because we're going to be redoing the confidential, I'm going to delete them and just leave the urgent one. And let's go ahead and process that. All right, so let's explore this here a little bit. So we filtered it. Our email filter does contain an email address. So, we did have what we were looking for. Just let it open. So here's all the information, the froms, the tos. A lot of information can be used in the logic, including the headers of your email. Sometimes they can be functional. There's like 43 different in this case. You can use all this to do link filtering and all that good stuff. Here's all the configurations from the headers. I'm going to shut up. Basically all the information available to you to be able to export. Obviously, the most common ones would be your to, your CCs, your froms. Here's your reply to. If there's an actual reply to list, it will be on that one. That will be if it's a chain of emails. And of course, there's the attachments, which in this case says there's only one, which is correct. And we're going to be exploring that in a second. You also can see here the log messages that I placed that tells me it came from my Outlook email to my GMX account. The subject, the body was simple text, the date that it was received, and that it has one attachment. Now it's time for us to filter our attachment. And here's our filtered attachment. It did find one. There was one. Gives us the name, the information, content. The content stream itself is here. If you want to take the binary content for your own parsing, some cases you might, depending on what kind of content it is. But you also have the, open this up, position, the content type, and all this information. Obviously, the name will be the primary one. So now we can pass the name to our save email, and it will save and conclude the demo. Now we can go back here to our folder, and if we refresh, actually we don't need to. We did not save the email. We just saved the attachment, and here it is on the second run around. With that said, that concludes my demo and utilization of the activities. I think beyond this, I just wanted to highlight one thing on the activity side, specifically on the Outlook and Exchange. There's obviously a lot more options than IMAP, POP, and SMTP, which is why it makes it more feature-rich. POP in IMAP is just retrieve. IMAP does have delete and move, but aside from that, you're just left with those options and send. But with Outlook, you also have the ability to delete. You have the ability to mark as read and unread. This can be useful if you're trying to get an email, process it, check that there's no errors happening. In other words, that it concluded successfully, and then finally say mark it as read. This can help your flow and your process. Exchange also has an option. You can move it to other folders. Like if you have a folder designated to complete emails, you can do that. Reply, and of course, save the desktop mail message and set categories, which is something the other ones don't have. But aside from that, this concludes my presentation.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Any questions for Jeffrey? You guys can take yourself off mute if you have any questions. And Mason, are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mason's always ready.
I know.
Let's see. Share my screen real quick. That look like it's coming through?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, they're good.
Awesome. Oh, now there's a bar on the way. Great. That. There we go. So my name is Mason Turvey. I am going to be covering Excel automation. All right, so this is going to be Excel automation in activities in Studio Desktop. We aren't going to cover the integration service activities, but just be aware that those also exist. So you can interact with Excel through your O365 APIs through integration service. This is going to cover working with local Excel files in Studio Desktop process. So one of the first things that you need to know is when you create an automation, you'll see I've created this Excel automation as our demo. You're going to want to create it as a Windows process to work with Excel. So to do that, you go down here, compatibility Windows. You can also work with these in Windows Legacy. Doesn't let you create new ones. So your legacy processes that already exist, you obviously can use Excel as well, but we're going to be working with Windows here. You can choose your language. I'm going to choose VB for this one. And I've got some sample workflows here to go through. Before we get into those, I want to point out where you can find your Excel activities. So first in your project, when you create a new Windows process, they come in automatically under this UiPath.excel.activities package. You go to Design, Package Manager, then you'll be able to find those. You just type Excel, right? And it comes in here. You can update, add it to the project if you don't already have it. Also, quick shout out, if you use the Windows active process, your mail activities also come in, so you can do both. Both of these demos with one project type as soon as you open it. So I'm going to start with, there's two different types. There's two flavors of Excel automation, and they both kind of serve different purposes. You will find both of them if you have it installed. It's going to be in installed here, and then you go down to Excel right here, and you'll see a bunch of activities on the top level. These are what we call our workbook activities. The workbook activities they're using an API, not like a REST API, but like an interface within Windows that can directly interact with an Excel file without opening it. So your workbook activities don't need to open the Excel file, but they are a little bit more limited in what they can do, right? So you get this set of activities, and that's it. There's also our CSV activities. So if you have a CSV file that, it opens in Excel, you can read and write those. That's it. Those are the only two things that you can do with CSVs. Just nice for passing data tables back and forth. It's a little bit lighter weight than Excel. The last flavor, and the flavor that is what most people are using, and it's a little bit more in depth than the workbook activities, is our application activities, our Excel application activities. So you'll see that there's two top level activities here, and then there are a ton of categories to work with, right? You've got cell chart, pivot table, range, workbook. So these top two are scopes, just like any other scope in UiPath. They're going to be a container for other activities. And it's actually, if you look at what I have here, 0, app activities, there is a nested feature to these scopes. Your Excel process scope is a scope that encapsulates Excel running, right? That's the process of Excel running. The reason for that is because you can't have like multiple workbooks open and running all at the same time. You want to make sure that there's one Excel process scope that you're attaching to, and when you're done working with it, it closes that. And so having this Excel process scope is nice to keep things within one Excel process, so you're not looking at multiple EXEs running at the same time. And then there's a use Excel file underneath of that. This is what opens the file. And you'll see that I have that nested inside of the Excel process scope. Right, and then I have an Excel file that is declared here in the Excel file. And then we go down into our cell activities. You'll see we have autofill that just autofills like when you drag and drop an Excel on a range, and like maybe it's a date range and it just increases the day by one every time you drag it. This autofill does the same thing. You can get the cell color, you can read the cell formula, you can read the cell value. So the difference between those is you're getting the actual formula and you're getting value, and you can write to cells. You can work with charts, so like different graphs that you would insert in there. You can insert those, get them, and update them. So if you change the values in the Excel file and that chart's already there, you can update it to match what's changed. Pivot tables you have a lot of interoperability with those as well, right? Change the data source, create one, filter one, refresh. I'm not going to go into demos on these two. They're a little bit more in depth, but just know that those are there. The range activities is where we find most of the interaction with Excel. We have things like append range, autofit range, clearing sheets, copying, pasting, deleting, a lot of read-write operations that go on in Excel. You can also format, so you can format a range as a table, similar to like how you would format as a table in the top bar of Excel. You can format cells, so you can change the actual formatting, between like number, general, currency, date, things like that. You can also change the cell color and the text types, the size, things like that. You can get these, so you can actually interact with the Excel selection. So when you're in Excel and you select specific ranges, you can get that selected range using this get selected range activity. Similar to like if you were building an Excel macro, just moving the selection around and working with that. You can insert columns and rows. You can look up ranges. You can match, reading, removing duplicates. So just like get selected range, you can actually change the selected range with select range. You can sort text to columns. You can put a VLOOKUP in there. And another one this is probably one of the most common, right, is write data table to Excel. And then in workbook activities, we have a lot of like higher level stuff. So like sheet activities, you can do for eaches in your sheets, insert sheets. You can actually invoke your VBA macros from here as well, right? So you can do run spreadsheet macro, or you can program VBA into your automation to run it from here. You can refresh Excel data connections. So if you have your Excel connected to, say, a SQL database or just a different data source, you can refresh that while working with it to get the latest data in UiPath. And then you can obviously save your Excel files to different locations. We'll work with a lot of this here. I'm going to go through. This is just showing this first workflow. I'm not going to be doing any reading and writing. This is just showing what you can do with your Excel process scope and your use Excel file. You'll find a lot of things over here in your properties. And when Excel comes in, it has a lot of things that show up in your project. So if we go to like project settings here, you will see Excel Modern, right? And you can configure a lot of settings here. These mostly apply to the application scopes, right? There are values for launching, debugging, right? There's waiting, there's visibility, right? Whether you want the window to show up when the automation's running, basically, that's your run value, debug value. So you can set this for when it's running in production to false, but you can put it up when it's in debug, when you're running on your development side, and different things like that. You have a lot of these available to you. And the cool thing about this is it's project wide, right? So every time you call in a process scope or a different scope, you have the ability to configure that across the entire process, so that those defaults last. You also can override those in your properties, right? So anything that you set in that project settings menu, you can override here. And then the same thing on your use Excel file, right? Those properties come through and you can override them. You can interact with password protected Excel files. So you can edit the password and set the password that is going to be used to open the file. And then you have some options that have to do with like reading and writing and the resizing of the window. So you can create your Excel file if it doesn't already exist. So that's pretty nice for just dropping a new one into your project when you're just putting a data table in. You can keep it open when you're done with it. That's nice for attended automations where you might want a user to just look at the Excel file after it's done and, correct it or read the data that's on there. This is one of your project level settings, right? But this is your read formatting. This is what formatting is applied to the values that are read from Excel. You can set things as read only. You can resize the window to maximize or minimize if you want to change that visibility. You can save changes or opt to not save changes at the end of this. And then there's your sensitivity label and operation here, some more in-depth Excel things. You also have the ability to use a template file. I will walk through what that looks like in a little bit. We're going to start with some reads. All right, so I have some Excel files here. And by default in a studio project, you're not going to see Excel files that you drop into your folder because these two things are going to be unchecked, objects and other. So if you want to see your Excel files in your Explorer pane in Studio, handy thing is to go up here to the filter and check other, and then your Excel files will come up. We're going to be using this data, this Excel data file, right, to read a table. We've got this guy here. This is our table. You'll see that we have other cells in here as well. So we're going to have to select this. I also want to show how we read a sheet as a table. So we'll do that as well. Those we are going to do read range. Now what's cool about this, when you specify your Excel file, if it already exists, it has to exist, then you get the ability to do these types of selections. So I can go in here to my range, right? This is the bread and butter of the app integration activities as opposed to the workbook activities, is I can now dynamically interact with my Excel instance, right? So I can say, oh, I want to read the sheet 1, right? That's where the table was. Excel almost always comes through either singular values or data tables. Typically, you're going to be working with data tables. So anything that's like a read range, right? It's going to be some type of data table. So I can create a variable here, call it DT data 1, right? And then I can output that as text, right? Call that text DT, and then I can log that off. Just like that. So that's what we're going to do here. So that's our first read range. Let's just go ahead and run it. Now, to run these, you'll want to make sure that your Excel file is saved, and then I'm going to close it. It's best practice just to close your Excel file when you're running your Excel processes. And so you'll see when we run this, it's going to go through the Excel process scope and actually open Excel up. And then it's going to open that file in Excel, and then we're going to read that range that's on sheet 1. So that was that second sheet that I just added with just the table. Going to take a second to open Excel. You see that it opened up down here, and we got the data and logged it off. So we can go here to our output and see that. So when we're reading ranges, we get some, you'll notice that this table that was logged has our headers, right? And those came through as headers in the table because I checked this has headers. So if you use has headers when you read a range, that top row is always going to be your headers. You can also set it to only take your visible rows. So if they're hidden rows, it'll only read the ones that are visible, right? And then there's read formatting options in here as well. You can choose the raw value or the display value. So that's like, if you look at your formatting in your Excel file, let's open it up real quick. You want to read the raw value, right? That's what's in here. Or you can read the display value. That's what's here. And so a lot of times you want to read the raw value, right? I don't want to see this $sign. I don't want to have to format that out later. I just want to see the number that's in there. So choosing raw value is nice when you just want to read those numbers and not get the formatting with it. If it's in there as text, you're going to get the raw value is going to be the same as your display value. So you're going to have to format it anyway, but sometimes it's nicely formatted, and you can read that raw value and get the data that you want. Now, if you have the UiPath plugin installed on Excel, then you see that. Is it up here? Nah, it's not here yet. I'm going to close this, not save it. If you have it installed in Excel, which I do, then you can also indicate, which is really cool. So you click this, indicate in Excel, and it's going to open the sheet, and then you get this UiPath Excel integration add-in, right? And you can select a range, and you'll see that it updates the current selection up here, and you can confirm, and then it'll pull it, right? And it hard codes that range in there. The other way to select ranges is go to Excel and custom input. You can select a table by name. That's really handy. You can select a pivot table by name and worksheet name. You can select a range with the sheet name and then the range address. And then you can just select a sheet like we did last time. So that's all available to you for reading ranges. That's basically how it works. It's tables, sheets, and ranges all baked into one. It's always going to come through as a data table. The other way we interact with Excel is with specific cells, right? So in here, we're going to read a cell value. So we're using the same Excel workbook. I'm going to come over here to transactions. I want to get this total, right? So in order to get that total, I am going to select the cell, right? I can indicate in Excel, or I can custom input that cell and then give it the worksheet. So I'm going to take my transactions worksheet and then give it my cell address. So that cell is C7. Let's see. There we go. So that's our cell that we're going to read. And then you'll notice that the type on your save to type is an out argument. It's going to you create a variable here. Go to your data manager and look at that. It's going to come out as a string every time. That's just the way it works. You can get the formatted text on here, right? And that's if the formatting is applied in Excel. If false, the raw value is retrieved. So that's the same thing as getting your raw values versus your display values, right? In the previous activity. Those are the only options you get with read cell value. The way that you do formulas, if you want to read a formula, is with another activity. So we've got a read cell formula you want to read the formula in that cell. I don't see this one used as much, but I mean, it is available to you. I'm going to indicate this one in Excel. Confirm it. Save it to cell formula. Right, and we'll log both of those off. So now we've got our cell formula. Yeah, the new line in here, and then I'm going to say value. There we go. Run this. It's cool. I with the app integrations, you can leave your Excel open. It's not going to think it conflicts. Going to attach to that process scope, read it, and then we have our output here. There's our formula. So that's our sum formula, and then our value here, right? If I check off get formatted text, run it again. I think. So what we got here is cannot convert from system.decimal, right? So our cell value is set to a string, and we're coming through as a decimal in there. So it's actually a decimal value that's getting pulled from Excel, right? That's our value. And our cell value is set to a string. So that's not going to work there, right? So you got to be careful about your data types when working with your Excel types, with your Excel pulls. A lot of times you're just going to get your formatted text and pull things out of there. This is a tricky one just because it is also a formula, right? So there are different layers to reading that one. Let's try changing this to a decimal right here. We have to find the type and see what happens. Right? Is this going to fix it? So now you'll see that we have an error in our log message. That's to be expected. So we got a toString that, but we don't have an error in our read cell value, right? It was able to parse that we changed that to a decimal. And when we run through here, it's now able to read that value. So you have to have your correct value type when you're reading a cell using the app integration activities, right? So the value is 145 there. We got our formula again. That's just a little way that it works. And it's kind of difficult to see because this is a formula. We don't have an actual value, right, in our formula bar here. So it can be tough to kind of deduce what's going on there. But the value that's coming out of that formula is just the number 145. So if I change my currency formatting to general, right, there it is. That's what we've got. But because it's formatted as currency, it's showing up like this. All right, so that's reading and writing a cell. And then we've got our workbook integrations. So again, showing you where those are. Excel, all these top level ones here. These ones do not require you to, I actually believe they don't even require you to have Excel installed, but they don't require you to have Excel open. They don't open Excel, right? They work in the background using a .NET library to read and write Excel files. That is why they're so limited in the way that they work. You have the same types of activities, right? Not as many, but you still have activities and you have your read and write. So I can read a range, and when I drop one in here, I don't need a scope, right? I just give it the workbook path. I can select that from this folder here. I can select a sheet name, right? Say sheet 1, blah, blah, blah. I can give it a range, or I can leave that blank. And then I have similar options in here. I can use the display format or not. I can have a password choose my range and file and everything up here. It can also add headers or remove headers if I want headers in there. And then I can set it to a data table. So when you're reading ranges, it's always going to a data table. I can also write ranges, right? I can choose an Excel file. I can give it a sheet, right? And you'll notice it doesn't have like those Excel options to select because it's not actually interacting with the workbook directly. It's working in the back end, right? And then I can write any type of data table that I want into that range, right? And I can select adding the headers again or not add the headers. I can select a starting cell as well. So if you want to append it, then you can select the starting cell. The app integration activities are better for appending, and we're going to look at that next. This is just the workbook activities. If you need something quick and dirty, workbook's your best bet. If you need to get more involved with an Excel file, then it's best to use the Excel integrations. I'm not going to walk through stepping through this and everything. I think that's fairly straightforward. I want to get to more in depth with our app integration stuff. So now I'm going to do some writing. And so what I've done here is I built a data table, right? It's got a name, address, and phone number. I'm just generating random data. You can do this using the testing activities in UiPath. So I'm generating a name, an address, and a phone number by setting it between the range of phone numbers. And then I add that data row into the data table using an object initializer here. And then I just add 10 rows, right? Putting it in a do while. Pretty simple. I'll output that as text so that we can read it before it goes in, and then breakpoint on the Excel process scope to open it up. We are going to create an Excel file this time. So this Excel file does not exist in our project. Create if not exists is checked here. And then I'm also going to use a template file for this one. So I have another Excel project or Excel file that's in here, right? Open that up. And it has the same headers as our data table that I just created. I'm using this template file as an initial template for Excel. So something that you'll find in a lot of business processes is you're already given the Excel file, the business wants to see it in a certain way, and you have to put data into the file that they're already using, right? A lot of times you don't want to work with a file that is actively in use from users. So you'll want to create a new file every time, send it off in an email or drop it into a SharePoint or a shared drive. So it's nice to have the original file, you clear your data out of it, and you use that as a template so that you can bring in all of the formatting, all of the tables, all of the named ranges, everything that they're used to working with will pull over from your template file into the new file, and you're actually creating a new file from that template. It doesn't change the template file. It's actually creating a new file off of that template file. So you can keep reusing that template file every time you want to create a new one. It's really nice for process reusability. I use this very extensively. You can use that, like I don't need to format cells ever using the Excel integration activities because my format's already coming in from the template file, right? So what I'm going to do here is instead of like our reads that we were doing, I'm actually going to write a data table. And I'm going to use this DT data that is coming from the data table that we built up top. Going to drop it in sheet 1. And you'll see there's some nifty little features here. We're going to run this multiple times. The second time I'm going to append and exclude headers, but they're pretty self-explanatory. When I exclude headers, it doesn't include the headers of my table. When I append, it's actually appending to the end of that sheet. Those are the only options you get here. There's also ignore empty source. If the source is empty, it's just going to be ignored, right? Otherwise, it'll throw an error if that table is empty. So if you were expecting an empty table, make sure you check this. to make it ignored. Or if you want to, if you're not expecting an empty table, and you want to throw an error, don't check this. That's basically just a suppress an error type thing. Depends on your workflow. But I'm going to go ahead and run this. We'll look at the table before it gets dropped in there. All right, so we've got a big old data table, and we've got the address is coming in as a dictionary. Let's see if that works. Might not. So now we're here on our Excel process scope, right? Step in, it's attaching to Excel. We're going to use our Excel file. It's going to create a new one off of our template, right? There it goes. It's open. Let's look at that in Excel. So we've got this new data, Excel, right? And then we are going to write our range. And let's look at that. This is our template file. You don't want that one. If I refresh up here, we've got a new Excel file. Let's open it and look at it. So you can see we pulled in our headers from our template file. Address didn't show up very nicely. That's just two stringing a dictionary, so that didn't work. But we've got our name and we've got our phone number in here. So that's, 66.66% successful, I think. We're going to keep new data, right? And then we're going to use it again. So it's not going to create a new one this time. I'm going to uncheck the template file because we don't want to use a template file when we already have the file. And I'm going to do append and exclude headers just to show you what's writing to the end of a table that already exists looks like. Since we're generating data from our testing activities, new data entirely, right? Going to drop that in there. Works pretty fast. And then you don't have to refresh because the file is already showing up here. Open up new data. And now we have 10 more rows. Look at that. That's basically it. That's Excel in a nutshell. Any questions on how Excel works? Or we got 10 minutes if there's anything that you want to like double click into and look closer at that we didn't get here. Anything come to mind? Is there anything in the chat?
While processing Excel file, so if we open the in between, if we open the files on the left hand side, is it will throw error or it will cause any issue with the macros or while executing?
So if you're opening the Excel file while it's running,
Yeah, here on the left hand side, you're creating new file and also just want to see whether the format is correct or not in between.
yeah. So with the template, I did open the new data and showed you that it doesn't pull the template in like immediately, so those headers weren't there. But if you're using a file that already exists, of course, it's going to be open. The idea behind the app integration activities is that, of course, they work on unattended processes. That's pretty simple. But they can also work attended with a human. So you can run your Excel activities in an attended process, and it's going to open up that Excel scope in the window, and you can, wait for input, or you can put up a message box and tell the human to enter data, the person to enter data while it's still in the Excel process scope. So that's what's nice about the like the use Excel file. You can resize the window to maximize. You can set the Excel process to show the Excel window, right? And so you can have the robot like interacting with the person through the Excel file that's already open. The app integration activities aren't really phased too much. You obviously can't open an Excel file twice in different Excel processes, but this already opens it, right? So if you have show Excel window set to true, right, it's already going to be open and they can just click into it to see it. With your workbook activities, though, these ones, they get mad if you have that Excel file already open. So they're going to throw an error if it's open. It has to be closed for these to work. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, last time when we were trying it, it was throwing errors, like, in between, if I open and also it is taking time, like, to open the Excel book. And once it is open, it shows some errors, and I had to close this UiPath Studio multiple times, and like again open like that. So I think might be that is through workbook. I think, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I will say when you're working with Excel in Studio Desktop, this is actually one of the cases where integration service is really handy for working with Excel. You do run in, if you have a giant workbook, and the app integration activities are better with working with big workbooks. I've gone up to, hundreds of thousands of rows inside of an Excel process, and these are still able to work. Sometimes they do chug a little bit for the app integration activities. These workbook activities that don't actually open the workbook, I've had less luck with them on larger workbooks. I've seen a lot more errors come through when the workbook gets to be a massive one. They just seem to time out and have a lot of problems. When you're working with a file that's uploaded to OneDrive or SharePoint, and you have your integration service activities, it doesn't happen. Those APIs are not phased by workbook size. They just do it. So if you have that availability to interact with those using your integration service activities, highly recommend it for large workbooks specifically. If you need stuff to happen quickly, do it locally, then you can use these activities for smaller workbooks. Another thing to call out is like I said, with the app integrations, you have to have Excel installed, but with the workbook activities, you don't have to have it installed, and therefore you don't have to have it licensed. So if you're running on a Windows machine, security or business doesn't want to pay for 365 license for that machine for whatever reason, then you can still use your workbook activities to interact with those. Those are not phased by not having Excel installed. They just work directly with the API layer in .NET. So yeah. Long answer.
Hey, Nathan. Yeah, thanks. Could you elaborate on these nested boxes? I know, like on the screen, this time around, I saw more boxes. They kind of nested in. What is driving that? Like in some other sessions, like you see like one box that is like followed by another kind of a sequence, whereas here I see more and more like nested boxes.
Yeah. So there's in Excel, you're always going to be kind of two levels deep with the app integration activities. There's one, you don't have to use this one. It's recommended to use this one. So this is controlling the Excel process itself. So when it hits this is called a scope, right? Or a container. Jeff, do you know the technical term for this? What is this called? You don't have to talk. It's a what?
Say that again.
What's it called when it nests like this? There's like a specific word for that. It's not scope. Is it scope?
It could be scope.
It's not container. I don't remember what it's called, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's a nested activity, right? And so underneath of this Excel process scope, the idea of this one is, and if you hover over it, it explains it. It either opens or reuses an Excel process. And it's to be used with this use Excel file, right? You can use this one without, if I drag it up here, it's not going to throw any errors, right? Perfectly happy. The reason we like, but it does give you a warning, right? It recommends it.
Okay.
But like the reason we do this is so that it attaches to one Excel process, right? If the Excel process is already open, then it'll attach to the one that's already open. And then use Excel file works with that Excel process that's already open and opens that file. So when you have Excel open, right? If I open this up, this is my Excel instance, and then I can open another, like I have no problem opening another sheet, right? And that popped up on a different screen over here. But like, right, there's still the same Excel process. It's just opening a different file in the same Excel process. So that's the idea here. When you use an Excel file, so this is now scoped to that file, and now if I try to pull this write data table out of here, it's mad, right? It says I need to be using an Excel file. So that one absolutely have to. So writing data
Okay.
table to Excel uses the Excel file that it's scoped inside of, right? And that's actually how you get these kind of interactions here. So I can choose the sheet, I can custom input, indicate in Excel. That's
I
pulling
see.
from the Excel file that's used.
Yeah, that makes sense. Got it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. All right, Diana, we're coming up on time.
Yeah, so I just saw a few things in the chat saying they didn't get the Excel file. It's there. So Jeffrey put that in there. It's email automation zip file, and you just need to download it. There's an arrow there. You can download it. So I don't know if people are having problems with that still. But other than that, thank you guys for the session today, Lagash, and Tracy and all the people helping out in chat. That's been really, really good. And then Mason and Jeffrey, thank you so much for these sessions. If there's anything anybody needs or has any other questions, please reach out on forum, and we will see you guys all on Wednesday. So thanks for everything.
And it looks
And
like people are asking for this Excel automation.
okay, so
I'll
can we
zip
put
this.
this in the chat?
Yeah, I'll
Okay,
toss that in there
awesome.
and give people a little bit of time to
Yep.
put it before we jump off. There you go. That is sent.
I'm gonna download that too.
How do we download this? Just a double click on it?
Yeah, there's an arrow there. Do you see it? You
Yeah, when
just
you hover
click
over
on
it.
the arrow, and then when it's done, it has a little check mark that you've downloaded it.
Okay.
And if there's Diane, if there's interest in going over like the SharePoint Excel activities for integration service, I can do that in another session as well. I'm down to do that.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think that's it. Hopefully, everybody, I'm just going to leave it open for one more minute. I'm going to stop the recording, and then the presentations and everything will be available for you tomorrow. All the recordings. So thank you, everybody, for attending today. Really appreciate it, and happy President's Day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.